So let me start with Nhlanhla. First of all, we're a little bit surprised at this talk of sanctions, which quite honestly we regard as reckless and as very damaging to our already ailing and struggling economy. We find this talk of sanctions as being purely alarmist, and we find it to be quite undermining to South Africa's sovereignty, secondly to the stability of our economy. There is no evidence whatsoever to point to any emergence of sanctions from any country or even from the United Nations Security Council, which is the only authority to institute global sanctions, if you like. There's no such talk. We've had, as a government, several bilateral discussions with the US government, and there's been no suggestion that the US will consider applying sanctions to South Africa. So it's difficult to respond to a question that says we are afraid of sanctions, because we don't have a line of sight as to where exactly those sanctions will be coming from, what will inform those sanctions, and what will be the purpose those sanctions will serve. South Africa has taken a non-aligned stance on the conflict in Ukraine. South Africa has not participated in arming any of the parties that are involved in that conflict. On the contrary, South Africa has taken upon itself to mobilize support and to mobilize engagement that will result to a peaceful resolution to this conflict. South Africa from the onset has been quite consistent to call for peace and to call for the parties involved in the conflict to sit down in the negotiations table. President Ramaphosa has repeatedly stated that there is no conflict that will end with a winner or a loser, particularly with this one, and that only a peaceful negotiation and resolution to this conflict will see peace in that region. And so it's kind of difficult to continue entertaining speculation around sanctions, which, as I've said before, we find to be rather reckless, and we find to be very undermining to efforts that are currently underway to build or rebuild our economy, which, as you all know, is under massive strain and pressure at the moment. Zama, well, repeatedly, South Africa is called, and President Ramaphosa has been quite consistent in this call for the reform of these institutions in the manner that recognizes the varying dynamics that developing countries find themselves under. The President has called for a view that also appreciates that, for example, with respect to climate change financing, how we transition to a completely decarbonized economy is something that will need to happen at a pace that we can manage, as that we can afford. And so for the President, really the bottom line is that we need an environment or a regime that guides how developmental financial institutions operate that is very much informed by the...
Well, let's cut that briefing and go to news just in now. Former ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule has been expelled from the governing party. Of course, in a statement, the ANC National Disciplinary Committee has confirmed that the expulsion of Magashule from the party. Now, the statement reads that Magashule was found guilty of contravening several rules of the ANC constitution. The statement continues that after a guilty verdict by the NDC, Magashule was allowed to show cause why he should not be expelled from the ANC. Upon the lapse of 7 days, the ANC had not received any representation to that effect. Now, let's get a reaction. We're now